Ladies and gentlemen, won't you welcome the Briefcase Blues!
Because we had a strange thing happen to us when we finished the movie. It was made to be a road show, and it actually, believe it or not, was about 26 minutes longer than this with an intermission, and at that length played much better. It was a much better movie. It went by faster. But you had to have what were called exhibitor screenings. Nowadays it's ironic, the exhibitors have no power, but then you didn't get booked in the theaters unless they thought they would make money. We used to call them the men in the white belts, and they were all over the country. And I was unprepared, but our exhibitor screenings went badly. And I was called into Mr. Wasserman's office.
This is Lou Wasserman.
Lou Wasserman, the chairman of the board. Actually, I liked him, but it was like being called to the principal, so I was like, uh-oh. And I went up there, and we had good previews and everything. He introduced me to a man named Ted Mann. He said, "Do you know Ted Mann?" And this guy was the head of Mann Theaters, which owned all the Fox theaters and was very powerful. He was like the second biggest exhibitor in the country at that time. And those were the days. It's very different. When you opened the movie first run, big house in the wherever part of town, and it played as long as it could there at a hard ticket in the road show, and then it went wide. And then it went into the neighborhoods and then the drive-ins. And you know, a movie like Animal House played 11 months in theaters. Now, you have to make your money. If you don't, bring dollars the first 3 days, you're fucked, basically. Because everything depends on it. And it was just a very different time. Anyway, so Mr. Mann said, Lou said, Ted, tell John what you told me. This guy was the head of Reagan's kitchen cabinet, by the way, major fundraiser for Reagan and Nixon. Anyway, he sat there and he looked at me and he said, Mr. Landis, I'm not booking your picture into Westwood. Westwood Village at that time had the Fox and still has the Fox and Bruin theaters, but then those were the prestige theater town in Los Angeles. And I said, why not? And he said, because I don't want blacks in Westwood. Excuse me? It was really shocking. I was like, what? Turned out around the country, exhibitors saw this movie and felt no white people would go see it. That it was somehow a black movie, and it was just so bizarre. It was like, huh? But Princess Leia's in it, It was like, it was sort of what? And again, it goes back to the music and John and Danny's passion for the music. At that time, it was all ABBA and the Bee Gees. And, you know, most of it's a long story, but basically I was told, okay, forget the road show, cut it. Lou was like. So we made lifts in the movie. We took out quite a bit, and then we had a preview at the Pickwood Theater in Westwood, which is now, I think, a Nordstrom's, you know, toward down at the mall. And that theater went well, but I thought it was, so I took out like another 12 or 13 minutes. And that's this movie. And it's interesting, because when I watch this, I enjoy it, but there's things it's like the rhythm of the film. It's weird, right? But the whole point of size is the whole point of it. Many years later, they found the Pickwood print. They threw out all the trims and lifts, but they found the Pickwood, actually the FBI found the Pickwood print. It was stolen by the son of the theater manager when we had the preview. And they took that print and duped the whole thing and then put in the missing 12 or 13 minutes. So there's a Blu-ray of the Blues Brothers that has it's called the expanded version, because there is no director's cut, but the expanded version. And that is 13 minutes longer than this and seems 30 minutes shorter. It really does.
It does. I was watching it the other day, and it's weird though, but watching the Blu-ray the other day, and look, the Blues Brothers is on TV twice a day on every cable network, it feels like. But I don't think, until you experience the way we just experienced again, this is the first time I've seen it in a theater in 35 years. I think you forget the enormity of the film until you see it on a big screen, until you hear it, until you witness it. And I sort of wonder what it's like for you to watch it, because you're sitting here and you've seen it. I guess you saw it a couple of years ago in the theater. This is the last, that's the last.
I hadn't seen it for like 20 years, and then I saw it 2 years ago in Melbourne, Australia, where, it was a long story, but there was a theater called the Valhalla Cinema, where the Blues Brothers played every midnight, every Friday and Saturday for 26 years.
Tired by the way you do. Time Papa's gonna poison you. So you would just start around your bed. One of these days find his own self dead. She said, say that. I said, well, what did I say to make you mad this time? Babe. She said, I don't know. Bye, bye, bye. She said, I don't know what my baby's gonna do. Now the woman I love, she got devil in her jaw. Clothes she wears made out of the best cloth. She came to wash it from the other side of the wall. From by the winter up a little before the fall. Sometimes I think you got your habit song. She said that. I said, well, what did I say to piss you off this time, babe? She said, ooh. Didn't even crack a smile. Said women kill me. I don't mind dying. Woman I love, I want a week for last. Woman I love, I got outcast. Come on, the baby, a long time ago. And once you step, I'm happy to let you go. She said you shouldn't say that.
What was interesting about it, it became like Rocky Horror. They had a whole ritual with it. So as part of a retrospective of mine, they filled this huge theater, twice the size of this. There had to be 700 Jake and Elwoods, about 30 nuns.
How many Nazis?
About 20, and there were 30 Chicago cops and 40 Illinois state troopers. There was even a guy as a Lake Wasapamani cop. I mean,
I just want to know how the guys dressed as the Nazis got there. That's really all I want to know.
They had a whole thing with the movie. There was dry white toast flying in the air. They were all dancing. They had a whole thing. It was pretty enjoyable, but that was the last time.
But what is it like for you to watch it? Because I assume you have so many memories, but I also assume at some point that you might have post-traumatic stress disorder while you watch it as well.
Well, no, whenever I see any of my movies, really, all I see are kind of the mistakes and the regrets and things I'd fix. And the things that amuse me in this still do. I mean, you said size. I like the whole idea of the entire military might of the state converging on Daily Plaza, and you cut to John and Danny in the elevator, like, you know, Girl from Ipanema.
Right. But it also seems to me, this was a film that you came to, look, Danny had a huge passion for the blues. When he met John in 1973, John did not like the blues. He had no knowledge of, no interest in. Danny converted him. I mean, John was listening.
Well, it's, you know, it's interesting. Yes, Danny got John interested, but John's ultimate, you know, epiphany really was on Animal House.
Right.
In Eugene, Oregon, a local blues musician named Curtis Salgado and John got so into it, and Danny really does know his stuff, and this whole mission from God is me making fun of Danny because he was evangelical about this. And that's the thing for me that I can say was, regardless of my feelings about the movie, it was completely successful in bringing back rhythm and blues. It's kind of hard for a contemporary audience to realize how radical that was.
Right. But, so this was a real passion project for him, to the point when he delivered the script, it was, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere around 350 pages, which is about 230 pages longer than a normal movie script. And it was up to you to pare that down. And I've always wondered, how the fuck did you do that?
Now, you have to understand that I've made 2 movies, The Blues Brothers Are Coming to America, under very interesting circumstances, one Paramount, one Universal, where I'm dealing with such a hot property, not the star, at that moment, that both times the studio said to me, can you have this movie in theaters by August? On Coming to America, it was 6 months. On The Blues Brothers, it was 9 months. In both cases, there was no script. And the answer is, yes, sir. Yes, I can. That's partly because you're not fighting about money at that point. You're shooting. So before Universal realized it, they're going, what? You know? But the script came in finally. It was thrown over my fence in a loose leaf binder, and it was written by Scriptathon 5000.
Scriptatron GL200.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay, well that's Danny. And it had some amazing stuff in it. This movie's sort of my interpretation of Danny's vision. Every member of the band had his own movie. But one of the challenges is, you know, most people in this movie are not actors. You know, and you just have to go with it.
But you got it. It's really remarkable. I remember the first time I saw it, I went, man, Aretha Franklin's a fantastic actor.
Oh no, Aretha's
Who knew that Donald Duck Dunn was a great actor? These guys are really funny. I mean, you got tremendous performances out of these guys.
No, that is Donald Duck Dunn. Duck has passed away about a year ago. But Duck, you know that Steve Cropper and Duck Dunn were the heart and soul of Stax Records. And they were the MGs, the Booker T and the MGs. Steve Cropper wrote every great song you know that Irving Berlin did. I mean, I'm serious. Steve wrote Dock of the Bay, Soul Man, you know, I mean, Titans, it's unbelievable. Green Onions, it's unbelievable. Anyway, and they were, that's exactly who they are. We were shooting on a stage, it was very hot. I'm there in Duckwood, throw another log on the air conditioner.
I said, baby, you know what time you've been for? I'm looking at every Christmas movie. You lean back, I'm looking right into the new year. And she said, honey, how do you know I gave cigarettes for my New Year's resolution? But I didn't give up smoking. I said, woman, you gonna walk a mile for a camel? Or are you gonna make like Mr. Chesterfield and satisfied? And she said, well, baby, that all depends on what your pack is. Regular or king size. And then she pulled out my Jim Beam, and to her surprise, it was every bit as hard as my Canadian club. And that's when I knew it was time for love. I got down like this one knee. I looked right into her big, beautiful blue eyes with the red rims around the outside edge for accent. And it was dark. It was hard to tell. But I looked in her eyes and I went like, I said, well, now what you got to say? Baby. She said,
talking about the fact your wife and I, we were all watching the film, and Deborah was saying that the great thing that she loves the thing about watching John and Danny, that's the experience for her. That no matter what traumatic experiences might have occurred during the course of this film, which went wildly over budget.
No, that's not true. You know,
I thought it went $10 million over budget.
I wish. No, that's an interesting thing. What happened was we were shooting. We were in production. We had been shooting maybe 6 weeks when Ned Tannen had a company who was at a press conference being attacked. The year when this movie was made, there were 4 other movies. Hollywood made 5 movies: Star Trek, Apocalypse Now, Heaven's Gate, 1941, and The Blues Brothers. All 5 movies had in common, they cost more than $24 million. $24 million was the magic number. That's the number that bankrupted Fox with Cleopatra. So the story, if you look at contemporary media, was Hollywood out of control. But ironically, 3 of those movies made a fortune, by the way. But what's interesting is that Ned said at this meeting, they said, we hear that Landis is destroying Chicago, and well, that movie's out of control, and what's going on? And he said, well, I'll never forget, a $12 million budget. And when we heard that, Bob Weiss, the producer, turned to me and he said, I think we've spent $12 million already.
Your budget was what, 17 million?
There was no budget.
Oh, there was no budget.
We were shooting.
So how could you go over budget if there was no budget?
Exactly. Well, I mean,
basically it's just semantics at this point.
Well, the bottom line is this picture cost a fortune. It cost $27 million, which at that time would, even more ironically, would be about close to $100 million. And now $100 million is a studio picture. So there you go.
But did the problem with 1941, I mean, 1941 actually sort of was a specter over the Blues Brothers, wasn't it?
Apocalypse Now, 1941.
I mean, that's sort of But
all of those movies, we came, 41, I don't remember, 41 had come out, I think, and tanked.
Right, is that why Spielberg's in this?
Spielberg's in it. My wife, Deborah, she designed Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1941. And it's interesting, you know, one of the problems when you're a crafts person, meaning cameraman, an editor, and, you know, whatever it is, a costume designer, production designer, you can do brilliant work. And if nobody likes the movie, it doesn't matter. And if you can do mediocre work on a big hit movie, that's the credit. So 1941, which you did great work on, tanked, so nobody cared.
I liked it.
There you go. Well, anyway, I made Animal House, and John and Danny and I were, you know, The Blues Brothers was a movie before I shot Animal House. Did you know that?
I did.
Yeah, and so we were talking about it, and Steve Spielberg said to me one day, he said, come and be in the movie, come and be in 1941. And I said, well, I don't want to cut my hair or shave, you know, and he said, no, come and be one night's work on the back lot of what was then called the Burbank Studio. It's an incredible set with a theater with Dumbo. And, you know, that I'll never forget, because I went for one night's work. I think I was there 4 weeks of night shooting. It was very lavish, and in that movie, if you ever saw the movie, I'm the one covered in shit. I mean, before it was like a Three Stooges. Makeup! They kept throwing dirt on me. I'm the motorcycle messenger that delivers the thing that, where Belushi says, look, baby, look. That's right. Anyway, so because he was in that, I said, okay, you be in, and I've always, I don't know if you know this, but I've always had directors in my movies. I have a lot of directors in my movies. And I said, Steve, you be in my movie. He said, okay. So I said to my wife, all right, that guy threw dirt on me every night for a month. I don't want him to look too good. And he showed up, and she shaved his beard and cut his hair, and he looked great. Had a little mustache. She said, Steve looks great. What the fuck? You know, why is he? She said to me, Steve's also my employer.
So she's the pragmatic one in the family.
He's actually good, I think.
He's very good at it. But, you know, it's funny, you mentioned the fact that this was a movie before Animal House. I mean, certainly, I think many people didn't realize that the Blues Brothers had been very fully formed, not just the Saturday Night Live.
Before Saturday Night
Live. Yeah, the 70, from 73 basically on into 75, when it debuted in SNL as the Bees initially, not the Blues Brothers.
What happened was, John Belushi was in Second City in Chicago. Danny was in Second City in Toronto. And John went up to teach
and to pose for, and he was had to steal some guys too, right?
Absolutely. Well, they weren't stealing; they were farming. You know. In fact, you know that Saturday Night Live, what it did, what Lorne Michaels did brilliantly, can't fault them. So all that talent comes from either the Second City or the National Lampoon. So, for instance, National Lampoon had a show produced by Ivan Reitman and directed by, I forgot who, off-Broadway called Lemmings, which was a satire of Woodstock. And you know the cast, this is years before Saturday, the cast of Lemmings, John Belushi, Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, Christopher Guest, Bill Murray, Alice Clayton, and I forgot the other, I'll think of the other person. But amazing, I mean, this is years before, you know. And anyway, so John and Danny created Jake and Elwood as characters so they could perform. They used to perform in Toronto, and then in New York, they always performed in clubs with Willie Nelson's band or Delbert McClinton's band. And
they played the Lone Star Roadhouse a great deal.
Many times, yeah. And when I went to try to get John and Danny to be in Animal House, because the guys who wrote Animal House were all from the Lampoon, and Harold was from Second City, so they all knew it. They wrote the part of D-Day for Dan Aykroyd. Yeah, that is Dan. He's a motorhead. That is Dan Aykroyd. And they wrote the part of Otter for Chevy Chase. And they wrote the part of Bluto for John Belushi. And I really didn't want Chevy only because Chevy was he was the breakout star on Saturday Night Live the first year. He was huge because he's the only one in the cast who was, he kept saying, I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. Nobody knew who the others were.
Foul play had already
No.
So, no, I'm talking about before Animal House.
No, so what happened was, I was told by the studio, if you don't get these three guys, who are all hot on Saturday night, you're not going to get the movie. So I had to go to New York and tap dance for them, but I didn't want Chevy, so I sabotaged that. In fact,
how did you do that?
I had a wonderful lunch. It was Ivan Reitman and Matty Simmons and a studio executive named Sean Daniel and me and Chevy. And Chevy at the Polo Lounge, Chevy had this big cigar and he was on top of the world, and he was choosing between Animal House and Foul Play. And they were convincing him, you know, to do Animal House, you know, and he was, and I didn't want it. And I said, Chevy, honestly, you should do Animal House, because if you do Foul Play, that's a leading man. That's a Cary Grant part. And you're opposite Goldie Hawn, who's like a major movie star. In Animal House, you'd be part of a repertory company, an ensemble. And under the table, Ivan's kicking me. Anyway, I was successful. But by the way, the Foul Play was a huge hit, made Chevy a star. And I ended up working with him later. But in the meantime, John agreed to do it, and Lorne Michaels wouldn't let Danny out. He was so angry that John, so that's what happened. But I became really close to Danny, and Danny told me all about Elwood, and then I met with Jake, and then John, and we did this thing, and partly to get John to do the movie, Universal made a development deal, which is really, usually nothing happened, but it was a development deal. It was a way to give John a little extra money to do Animal House, which he did. And Universal had no intention. They didn't know what the hell the Blues Brothers was, nor they cared. Lorne would never let John and Danny perform as Jake and Elwood on the show.
It's our friend Mr. Rodnell. The blues. Oh, that
when they finally did, they couldn't be the Blues Brothers, they were the King Bees. And he put them in those bee suits that John hated those bee suits. Although he looked cute, but he hated them. And Carrie Fisher was Danny's girlfriend at the time.
John had fixed them up, if I'm not mistaken.
I have no idea, but they were together for a couple of years, and they were engaged once. Anyway, and they both have webbed toes. So we used to say they were genetic mutants. They were perfect for one another. Anyway, so when Carrie hosted Saturday Night Live after The Empire Strikes Back, and she said, well, I won't do it unless the Blues Brothers do it. So John and Danny came on and sang, and we had a big talk, and what are we going to sing and all that. And with Paul Schaefer, we said, okay, Soul Man, Sam and Dave. So they did that. The response was incredible. Steve Martin, who was in the audience, said to them, will you guys open for me at the Universal Amphitheater this summer? And so then we realized, man, let's put a band together. So with Paul Schaefer's help, we put this amazing band, with John really, we put this extraordinary group of musicians together. The guy who really is a terrible actor in the movie, Michael Kleffner, who's that giant in the wings when Elwood says, oh my God, the Mafia's after us.
Clarion Records.
Head of Clarion Records. That guy, Michael Kleffner, he was really an A&R guy for Atlantic Records. A&R guys, that means pimp. Anyway, but for and he approached John at somewhere and said, I would like to make a live album of your date at the amphitheater. So great, you know. That's, by the way, that day in the afternoon, Deborah, wherever she is, and I got married. And that night, the whole wedding party went to see the Blues Brothers and Steve Martin. It was that night. And they were a sensation. The album came out and went triple platinum. It was so, you realize at Universal they went, John and Danny are the stars of the most successful TV show in the country. They have the most successful album in the world. And John's the star of Animal House at that moment, the most successful movie in the world. And we had the option of the Blues Brothers. They said, can you have this picture in theaters in August? We said, yes, sir. And what's fascinating, they wouldn't put the soundtrack album on. Universal and Decca and MCA Records said, who would buy this?
But it was their conceit that every artist who was in the movie was past their prime, wasn't it? That was the...
Oh, not their conceit, it was true. Though, yeah. That music was, no, the artists were not past their prime, but the music was out of fashion. They didn't think anyone would buy it. And Ahmet Ertegun, when we made a deal with Atlantic, it's another deal, we're happy to make the deal. Ahmet wouldn't put John Lee Hooker on. That's recorded live, John Lee and Pinetop Perkins, on Maxwell Street, and he wouldn't put him on the album. And when I said why, I was told he's too old and too black. And it's ironic, and with great pleasure, 2 years later I called Ahmet, who said, I know why you're calling, because John Lee Hooker had a platinum album.
All right, we have to wrap it up. There's a party, but we'll take 2 questions. I know there's a lot of people in outfits who may have questions, and John's got some folks. So if anybody has 2 questions, yes.
I forget the name that
I can hear you!
What was your name in the movie?
Oh, in this movie? In this movie?
Yeah.
I'm Trooper LaFong. By the way, I did that stunt. I flipped that car.
And by the way, tell people who gets up on the table in the jail cell.
Oh no, there are lots of people in this movie you never know are there. I mean, one of the gospel singers is in the choir right behind. Who?
Chaka Khan.
Right, Chaka Khan. And because Chaka, Deborah and I rented a house from Chaka, and Chaka said, I want to be in the movie. I want to be in the movie. I said, well, you want to be in the choir? Yes. So she came in. The 2 numbers that are recorded live in this picture were James Brown and John Lee Hooker. And so when we recorded the James Brown thing, I said, Chuck, I want you to shout, do some gospel shouting. And we did a close-up and everything, and she couldn't. Now Chuck is great. I said, why can't you? And she goes, John, I'm Catholic. I've never been to the Baptist church.
But
anyway, but Chaka Khan, the guy, the prisoner that jumps up on the table and starts to ride is Joe Walsh.
But I think that's interesting that Joe Walsh has that moment because Joe Walsh, either it was him or one of his guys, helped John Belushi sober up long enough to finish the film, if I'm not mistaken. Wasn't that sort of a key part of helping?
I don't know.
Yeah, Joe Walsh had a part in helping John get to the making of the film.
Well, John got really bad the last 4 weeks of the movie, and it was difficult because he was addicted to coke, and the cocaine would make him drink, and then it was like a spiral. John could, when he was raging, he could try. In Animal House, there's a gag I always thought was funny, and then I kind of regret it later because idiot people tried to do it, which is when he gets that Jack Daniels and drinks the whole thing, right? Well, if you do that in real life, you get alcohol shock and die. It's a joke. That was tea, you know, and in any case, I saw him do that to a bottle of Courvoisier once under the influence, and it's amazing he lived as long as he did. It's kind of, the reason they're wearing dark glasses is because we're just being perverted. I mean, what's the most important part of an film?
Their eyes.
Their eyes. Let's put them in dark glasses. I mean, that was literally how crazy we were, and it turned out to be a good thing.
Well, the funniest part is watching him 35 years again later with the crowd, when he takes his glasses off in that scene with Carrie, you realize how much you missed seeing his eyes, and you could tell how much the audience reacted to that moment.
Well, we actually had to, that was a big thing. I said, you have to clean up, you know, you have. He was such a wonderful actor. He really is good at it, see, you know, just with his face. So sweet. The movie's insane.
We could have just skipped the whole Q&A and just gone to that. Yes, sir. We'll take this one. We'll have two, and then we'll wrap it up. Yes.
I showed my son about 10 years ago with the 25th anniversary edition Blues Brothers, and if you could worship a movie, he does. And the first question he asked after the movie for me, and I told him I would ask him here, how many cars were destroyed in that movie?
Not as many as you think. We had a 24-hour body shop going in Chicago, and I think probably, excluding the Pintos, because we destroyed a lot of Pintos, but cars in general, we probably destroyed only about less than 50. But what you see is literally thousands of collisions. And what we did was, we bought these cars, and there were about 22 cars that were, you know, had they were indestructible, and they were the same. We used the same cars for the Chicago cop cars, the Lake Wassapalmani police, and the Illinois State Troopers. It was just decals and Mars bars difference. Otherwise, they were the same cars. And we crashed them. And then those guys in the body shop, and by the end of the movie, these cars were just Bondo. That's all they were. There was no steel left other than the undercarriage. And there were about 7 Bluesmobiles that did different things. The Bluesmobile, it's interesting because it was invented by a stunt guy, but Tommy Huff. But it had the passenger actually worked the brakes, not the regular brakes, but he had each tire had individual brakes, and which now, by the way, Mercedes, there's some cars that adapted that 20 years later. But this was before computers.
Now we have Bluesmobile technology.
But actually, we didn't destroy that many cars. It's not like, you know, many years later when we made Blues Brothers 2000, which is a terrible movie with brilliant fucking music. The music's incredible, and all that music in Blues Brothers 2000 is recorded live because of new digital. You can do it. That's amazing music. Anyway. There's one big car crash in that. It's a big car crash in which 64 cars are destroyed. It's one stunt. And what was fascinating was we bought the entire police force in Canada, their Native Americans are called First Nations. It was an Indian tribe's entire police force we bought. And those cars, you crashed them once, it was over. These cars, you could crash over. These were like American steel. And you know why? because it's actually safer for the driver if the car collapses. In Animal House, this is my car stories, but in Animal House, we had a Lincoln Continental that was Flounder's brother's car. And we had 3 of them. We had what was called the picture car, the perfect one. And then we had the one that we chopped up and made into the Deathmobile. And then we had one which was used for, remember when they run away from the bar and they jump in the car and it crashes and everything? So we said, okay, and it runs in and it crashed. It was not even scratched. And I said, well, when they pull up in the garage, it's got to be beat up. So they hit it with sledgehammers and couldn't dent it. 1961 Lincoln Continental. The steel was like that. So you know what we did? They took a bulldozer and went to make it look beat up. It was indestructible, that car. But ironically, that's what killed you, because if the car collapses, it absorbs the blow. And so now cars are meant to accordion and all that stuff. Who cares?
All right, well, I promised one more question. I know there's a lot more, but we at some point have to end, so yes.
Was there any music in 2000 that anybody musicians that you wanted to didn't have?
Any musician you couldn't use, you didn't get?
Oh, well, in this movie, the preacher was supposed to be Little Richard. And I flew and that was a particular moment in time when Little Richard had found Jesus again. You know, he found and lost Jesus 7 or 8 times. And as one does. And I flew to Tennessee and went to his church. You want to have a good time. That was the best service. I mean, that was the most rocking concert I'd ever been. Just Tennessee, I don't know who these, but that choir and Richard, they were nuts, and that was incredible. Anyway, he wouldn't, because he felt it was sacrilegious. And so then James Brown was actually the whole other, so James did it, so we couldn't get Little Richard. He was the only one I couldn't get.
All right, look, I could do this for hours. You and I once did this for like 3 hours. One of my favorite filmmakers, one of my favorite people, and one of my favorite movies, and it's an honor to have done this, and thank you for being here for the film festival.
Thank you very much.
John Landis, ladies and gentlemen.
And support the Dallas International Film Festival.